You have seen the movies, the golden pharaohs, the towering pyramids, the gods with animal heads staring down from painted walls. You think you know ancient Egypt, but almost everything you picture when you hear that name is wrong. Or at the very least, it is only half the story. Because behind the gold and the monuments and the mythology was something far more surprising. A civilization of real people, living real lives, doing things that would make you stare. Let's start with something nobody tells you. The ancient Egyptians were not the serious, stone-faced figures you see carved into temple walls. They played board games. They threw parties. They wrote love poetry so vivid and so tender that when archaeologists first translated it in the 19th century, several of them refused to believe it was thousands of years old. One surviving poem, written over 3,000 years ago, reads like something a teenager might text today. Longing, obsession, the inability to sleep because someone keeps crossing your mind. Now let's talk about what they actually ate. Forget the feasts you have seen in Hollywood films. The average Egyptian lived on bread and beer. Not the beer you know. A thick, cloudy, nutritious brew that was closer to liquid bread than anything you would recognize. It was so central to Egyptian life that workers who built the pyramids, and yes, they were paid workers, not slaves, we know this from the records, were given beer rations as part of their daily wage, up to several liters a day. Archaeologist Mark Lehner's excavations at Giza uncovered the workers' village, complete with a bakery and brewery large enough to feed and hydrate tens of thousands of people at once. The pyramids were not built by broken men in chains. They were built by a well-fed workforce that received medical care, had their injuries treated, and were buried with honor when they died on the job. We found their graves. But do not mistake this for a gentle civilization. Ancient Egypt had a shadow side that history tends to skip over. Punishment was brutal and public. Thieves had their hands cut off. Certain crimes resulted in the cutting of the nose and ears. The mummification process, which we romanticize endlessly, was in reality a deeply disturbing procedure that took 70 days and involved removing every organ from the body through small incisions, dissolving the brain through the nasal cavity with a hooked instrument, and packing the body in natron salt until it dried completely. Embalmers were specialists, but they were also considered ritually unclean for the work they did. Neighbors reportedly kept their distance from them, and yet all of this was done out of profound love. The Egyptians were obsessed with the afterlife not because they feared death, but because they loved life so much they could not accept that it simply ended. Every mummy, every spell in the Book of the Dead, every amulet placed inside a coffin was an act of desperate hope, a message to the universe that said, "This person mattered." Now, here is where it gets genuinely surprising. Ancient Egyptian women had more legal rights than women in most of the world would not achieve again for another 2,000 years. They could own property. They could initiate divorce. They could conduct business, appear in court, and inherit equally with men. A woman in ancient Egypt could sue you. She could win. She could then go home to the house she legally owned and drink her 4 liters of beer in peace. Marriage in Egypt was not a religious ceremony. It was a practical arrangement that began simply by moving in together. Divorce was equally straightforward. If a marriage ended, the wife was legally entitled to take back everything she brought into the household, plus a portion of what the couple had acquired together. Ancient Egyptian divorce lawyers, and yes, contracts and legal disputes over divorce exist in the records, were kept very busy. Children in Egypt were treated with a tenderness that feels strikingly modern. They played with toys. Archaeologists have found wooden dolls with moving limbs, carved animals on wheels, and leather balls, all thousands of years old. Children swam in the Nile, kept pets, and according to multiple records, were deeply loved by parents who grieved them openly and without shame when they died young, which happened often. Disease was everywhere. Life expectancy for an ordinary Egyptian rarely exceeded 40 years. Dental decay was so widespread and so severe that many Egyptians died from tooth infections that spread to the jaw and skull. The sand that got into their bread from the grinding stones wore their teeth down to the roots over time. Even pharaohs suffered from it. CT scans of royal mummies have revealed heart disease, arthritis, parasitic infections, and in several cases, evidence of malaria. Rameses II, one of the most powerful men who ever lived, suffered from severe arthritis and a dental abscess, so advanced it likely caused him chronic agony in his final years. Power did not protect you from your own body. And then there are the gods. 3,000 years of continuous religious practice produced a mythology so vast and so strange that it still has not been fully mapped. But underneath the animal heads and the elaborate rituals was a surprisingly personal faith. Egyptians did not just worship gods from a distance. They wrote them letters. They left small notes at temple shrines asking for help with specific problems. Surviving papyri include requests for help with infertility, with unjust neighbors, with lost property, with illness. One letter, written to the spirit of a dead wife, asks her to please stop haunting the author in his dreams because he was good to her and she knows it, and this is not fair. 3,000 years ago, someone was arguing with their dead wife in a letter. This is what ancient Egypt actually was. Not a distant myth carved in stone, not a parade of golden gods and impossible monuments. It was a civilization of people who got toothaches and fell in love and drank too much beer and argued with their neighbors and grieved their children and lay awake at night thinking about someone they could not stop thinking about. The pyramids are still standing, the mummies are still here, and somewhere inside all of that stone and silence is the unmistakable evidence of something that has not changed in 3,000 years.